Look at you wearing pants and shoes. Look at, no, I don't see yoga pants in the room, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but the first 2 times I went out on the road, I split a pair of pants. So these are what I call insurance. So I'm really excited to be here today and to help you land the plane figuratively with this conference. I've heard some of the things that you're wrestling with, and I know that Campus Logic and their team has been providing you incredible value at home, but now here to connect you with peers and talk about innovation and figuring out how you can get through this next hurdle. So what I'm going to talk to you about is specifically how you can drive innovation no matter where you sit on the org chart, because I have found it doesn't matter where you sit. It doesn't matter how fancy your pants are. And I have seen some fancy pants here today. Some people have been preparing to come out from COVID, right? You can be able to drive change that will make a difference for our students. So you did hear a little bit about my background, but I think there's probably a part about my background that matters a little bit more for today. And that is that I grew up in poverty in rural Montana, so I can turn anything into jerky. I grew up in a family where I didn't know we were poor. We grew up in like less than $20,000 a year, but it was difficult for me to know we were poor because there was other weird stuff going on. They were preppers, which, yeah, for those who don't know, is a kind of person who their idea of fun is preparing for the end of the world. Yeah, and I can tell you that as a daughter of preppers in a global pandemic, I have confirmed there is no limit to the number of ways a person can say, "I told you so." Yeah, real fun. It's been real fun. So I don't have a background that would normally, I was very unlikely to get to go to college, very unlikely to be standing in front on a stage and talking to people in higher education. My experience, though, is very similar to a lot of the students that we have really spent a lot of energy thinking about here at this conference. Low-income, first-gen students of color. In general, my experience was nobody talked about college. Not in a productive way. My dad would often make jokes that if I wanted to go, that I should just do what my brother did and win a state championship in wrestling. Yeah, that was literally it. That was the only advice I got about college. And so for a lot of low-income and first-generation students, you get terrible advice. And what they do is they sift through and find a couple things to follow, right? We piece it together. I pieced together that if I was exceptional at something, that I would get to go. So I focused really hard. I wrestled for a hot second. It was not a good look. Moving on. I know you're like, what weight class? So I did finally graduate high school with I was a state champion, but in debate. But I had barely eked out with a 2.3 GPA because I had focused so much on that. And it turns out that people aren't nearly as interested in a mediocre student who can argue about it as they are a Big Ten wrestler. So I told you I'm here to educate you folks. So I had to stumble, and I did. I stumbled to a community college. It was like driving distance, 6 hours away, just enough to get away from my weird family. And when I got there, I had some beliefs about college that we need to talk about. I know that you've been thinking about the customer experience and student experience, but like, when I got to college, I really thought, I've been socialized, I've been taught to respect my elders. And so when these people who, I don't know if it's fancy pants, but they have doctorates, they have fancy titles, when they tell me to take out $5,000 in student loans to pay for this next semester, even though that was more money than I'd ever seen in my life, and I knew that they'd seen my FAFSA, which I cannot tell you how hard it was to get that financial information from preppers to give to the government. Right? So I've worked really hard for this, and I'm like, you guys know my situation, and if you're telling me in this letter that I should take out this loan, okay, well, I'm going to do it. And I naturally assumed, like many of our students, that the grown-ups would be watching, that they would, obviously, their data systems are connected, and they're going to know. They're going to keep, if I get off course, they'll keep an eye out, they'll let me know. And so I blindly moved forward, and I, unfortunately, was never trained in how to use an academic advisor. We don't teach students when to self-regulate and to know when to go in. I didn't go to office hours because that seems like a time when people are doing office work, right? A lot of coded language. And so I transfer, It's cute. I mean, a lot of the credits, like they didn't transfer with me, but I did, okay? So I transferred to Oregon State University, and I show up and finally graduate. It took me 7 years total to get my bachelor's degree. And when I finally left college, I had 50 extra credits that I didn't need and $50,000 in student loans. And this is the best case scenario, because you know that a lot of our students don't actually ever make it through that door in the end. They don't graduate. But it turns out that what I had experienced in my educational journey is I had stumbled on kind of it's like a dirty secret, but it's really just a reality we need to talk about if we're going to talk about innovation. And it's that higher education was never actually designed around students. The faster you can accept this, the faster I can get you to a space where we can talk about innovation, creativity, and change. Everything that goes wrong in higher ed for students in some way is inherently connected to this. When we first created universities in this country, they were actually designed mimicking a model from elsewhere that was designed around the faculty. It's because that was the intellectual capital we had, right? Like otherwise, why would people pay us ever to do anything? And so, you know who's, by the way, the most uncomfortable about that? The faculty. Because they have a front row seat to watch students walk out their door every day for a reason they've raised their hand about 50 times. And it just doesn't get better. Our institutions we've never given the people who work there the time to work on our design. When's the last time you actually had the free space to think about student empathy and how you can understand their experience? I mean, I know we've been talking about it here, but like in your day-to-day, we just don't. We're always trying to firefight and be everything to everyone. We got to do now economic development and long-term career outcomes and efficiency and accountability and that report for the state board. And we're always trying to do stuff, right? Initially, it was designed around the faculty. Over time, it's really been more administrative, but it's not because someone's intentionally like setting booby traps for students, like twisting their mustache in an ivory tower. It's actually just because it was never originally designed around students. We've never had the time or space to work on that. And so our systems are, reactionary at best. But for people who are uncomfortable with this, sometimes people give you a hard time. I have a feeling you get it. All I have to do is point out one example that's true about all of your institutions. And that's graduation, which is allegedly something we are super into and we want to happen. So why is it that every university I go to, that your graduation process is the same? When it's time for the student to graduate, you don't know. Student has to tell you. We as institutions, no idea. Data systems, they're like 9 dirty boxes in the basement, not connected, right? After the student tells us that they're ready to graduate, then we let them fill out a bunch of forms and paperwork. So fun. And lastly, you get to pay a fee. I mean, if we were checking out our carts at Amazon and it made you first, it didn't assume that you were ready to check out, didn't want to, and then it was going to make you fill out a bunch of forms and paperwork, and then it was also going to make you pay a fee, even though you'd already given all that information to them before, like you would get the memo. Like they don't really, nobody's paying attention, no one's listening, right? And so unfortunately, this is true everywhere. So this is actually a good thing, because there's this thing called isomorphism. Any of you higher ed nerds? Yes, isomorphism. Okay, so basically, like we copy each other. That's the gist. From the original design of universities, we mimic each other's design because we all think we're the Harvard of something, right? And so that's why we have weird named offices like bursars. Shout out to the bursars in the building, right? Like you have all financial aid office, you got enrollment management, you've got admissions. In many institutions, it's like one person, but we all have kind of the same stuff, right? Our design. That is a good thing, because if it is a design problem that we're going to have to deal with, I would argue we can design our way out of it. It's not about intention. It's not about motivation. It's actually, I think that people work in higher ed because it changed their life and they want to pay it forward. I don't know any other reason why people work there. And so you all care, and you all have the same bad design, and you all have the same problems, which means that solutions can port to other places, they can scale, and that you actually don't need to go it alone. The solution is actually in this room. Working with allies at other institutions, talking about the things that are getting in the way, that is the path forward, right? So isomorphism, most people think is bad. I think it's pretty sweet because I just don't think that like in reinventing the wheel on my campus is like the way forward, right? We actually have to pull heads together. So this is true because, well, if you look at our data results, which I'm going to talk to you about what's happening now and where we're going in the future, our systems were perfectly designed to get the terrible results that we're getting, right? Everything that happens on your campus you're trying to change, perfectly designed to do that. And the thing that matters is that our current design is it's insufficient for the students of the future. It's insufficient for the task ahead. So we're going to have to work on our design. We're going to have to center students in our design because the first step of design is empathy. And we're going to have to work together. Cool? All right. So let's talk about the new normal. Nothing feels normal right now, right? Especially, these pants are like real pants. These are hard pants. And these are only on stage shoes, you will see. There will be flats on my feet so fast. The students that are coming, we need to figure out what's going on, and I would say that the headline here is that if we think that students, 18 to 22-year-old, this iconic old school idea of what a student is, that is not the student of the future. Those students still exist, but I'm telling you that you need to open up our eyes and reimagine who our students are, and you will be fine. Any enrollment dips, any budget challenges, you will be fine. We want to reimagine, we want to open our eyes to the possibility of who our students are because they're coming from different places. There are things that are changing about them. The first is that the students of the future, they're really highly sensitive to bad design in a way that no generation has been before. Like we used to tell people, look to your left, look to your right, like you're lucky to be here, you're welcome, right? And the whole just bureaucracy, the way that we have positioned things, we tolerated it, you know? But these students, I mean, you can pick up your phone and someone can deliver food that you don't even have to talk to. You can get in a car and someone will take you somewhere and other than asking them how long they've been driving for Uber because you want to seem relatable, like you don't have to like that is insane. We understand what good design and customer experience is everywhere. I'm sure you've heard this, right? So I would say that this generation is highly sensitive to bad design, so we really have to do this work if we're going to actually be able to move forward, especially in financial aid and all the places that you've been spending your time. The second thing is digital is not going anywhere. If you think, anyone who says like, oh, I can't wait to get off Zoom, sorry, it's here to stay. And I don't mean the terrible version of education we had to do in the last 2 years, right? I mean that there is no possible future in which students don't have some experience with digital in their future. It is expected. They're growing up in the information age. We just have to figure out what good looks like, which we're not there yet, but we are close, right? So just know that the people who take digital seriously and don't just abandon what we've done in COVID, they're gonna be positioned well, which, by the way, have you guys noticed like how awesome you are? I mean, have you all like fully celebrated the fact that the last 2 years, how many cool things that are awful at the time you were able to do, right? Like we proved innovation was possible. Anyone who was ever a skeptic of higher ed, like, I mean, it's not a good look. Right? It didn't feel good at the time, I get it. But I'm just saying, I think that higher ed deserves the confidence you've earned over the past 2 years. You have innovated and adapted, and you have actually been able to accomplish things that never should have been possible. And so I'm just saying, don't drop the digital ball just because you feel like we can get back in person. The third thing is, students of the new normal, they want bite size. We often think of students as in a box. You're either in the box of like, you're admitted and you're our student, you're enrolled, or you're not. And students don't want that. They want to take a little here, a little there, a little dabble, a little Coursera, a little bit of just a class on this. They want to work on this skill or competency. They aren't necessarily looking for an MBA that you just throw on the table and be like, well, what do we got to do to get you in this car? Right? We have been shopping some of the old stuff, and this generation, the new normal student, who, by the way, they're not young. The new normal student everywhere has different expectations. They're not just looking for a degree. So we need to actually position our folks to be listening for what the kinds of skills and competencies and certificates and badges they want. I'm not saying we totally change everything. Most of our students, what we find is they're pursuing a degree and they want a badge and a certificate at the same time, right? So you just want to be thinking about that. It's a little bit different now. The other thing is they really want us to take equity seriously. not just one person, like a token person sitting on the executive cabinet. It's embarrassing. Here's why. It's 2022, right? Like, yeah. Also, on the same topic of it's 2022, they expect that we take sustainability seriously, right? And lastly, they all have transfer credits, all of them, because high schools have normalized that you're taking community college classes. So if your transfer process isn't that great, that means that the vast majority of your students are experiencing something that's not great, right? So we really have to make sure our process in that space is actually good, and we can bring in those credits, and that we can actually have, I'm not saying fully concierge-like experience, but a little closer than where we are now, okay? So that's what's going on in the new normal. The other part is they're often working, and they're older, right? Like, they're not 18 to 22-year-old. That group is, they're awesome. I watch them on TikTok. I'm not saying I try and emulate the dances, but I do enjoy like social media scrolling through, learn some makeup tips from them. But yeah, they are older. They are working multiple jobs. They are more diverse. And so just who we thought our students were, open our eyes, consider other options, because I'm telling you there is a massive number of folks who actually need to be educated. There are nearly 8 million people who needed reskilling because of COVID. Think about the potential there and the opportunity. If we don't just show up to employers and say, well, I've got an MBA and maybe, I don't know, a bachelor's degree. What do we got to do to get you in there, right? Instead, we go into employers and we say, what skills do your employers, what's reskilling do your employers need, or your employees need, and at what place on the org chart are they? Then you go back to your faculty and you say, where are we currently teaching these things? And then let's see if we can actually do a standalone, or is it clearly we teach that in this course, great, we can actually sell you one course. It's weird for us, it's not our jam, we don't like to do things in that way, but we got to, and that would actually be a huge opportunity in terms of your institutions partnering with employers. So let's also look at the rest of the data. I promise it's all good news eventually, right? So we're just gonna have to like white knuckle through it. So the first thing is that this tells us where we are in terms of our economic competitiveness for our country. We are not producing enough college graduates. I know people love to talk trash about higher ed, so I will admit that yes, we need to make sure that we are aligned with workforce and what we do actually is for jobs of the future and not like 20 years ago. I get it. Like, I know it's so fun, but it's still the single best way out of the poverty cycle, so I'm still like betting on higher ed. The other piece though, the really important part of this, is that we fail half of all the people who walk through the door. Okay? That's the actual elephant in the room, is that students don't graduate. So in order for our country to position, and we are hypersensitive to our competitiveness right now, we actually need to produce far more college graduates. And obviously we need to listen and talk to the public differently. We need to actually listen to them and not just, no, higher ed's worth it, right? But I'm just saying, in general, more college graduates, right? And we do have millions of people we need to be serving. The second part of this is that for the first time in US history, low-income students are the majority in public K-12. So that means that we need to serve more students, and they're typically going to be coming from a low-income background, which means that we need to be highly sensitive to financial process and how we support them financially, but just in general, they're gonna have experiences like mine, right? Like out in the Wild West, just ambling alone. So we have to make sure our design actually sets them up for success. The problem with this, just a minor one, is that we do terribly with that population. So this bottom, the bottom red line is people with my background. In the 1970s, we graduated about 6 out of every 100. And after all of the progress in society, it's only about 10 in every 100 are getting a bachelor's degree. But the good news is that this shows you progress is possible, because back in the 70s, 40 out of 100 high-income students were graduating. Now it's 80, right? It's even gone up since then. So we know that change is possible, and this just means all we have to do is make sure that we are prioritizing and focusing on the student experience and doing a better job and focusing on low-income students. Seamless pause. The other piece that I want to just give you a sense of is it doesn't matter what kind of institution you're in. I know that people are nervous about enrollment numbers. Let me just tell you, it does not matter what kind of institution you're in. It's not something you're going to market your way out of. You will not market your way out of this enrollment decline. I know that some people are excited about numbers coming up for the fall. I'm telling you, think about the big picture, be open to reimagining who our students are, and making sure our processes work for students who are adult learners and student parents, because every sector is being negatively affected by this decline, other than like Harvard. Is Harvard here? Yeah, no, we're fine, right? I mean, they're great. And if anyone here went to Harvard, we all know, you told us several times. Yeah. So this is also by states in terms of geography. Like, this is where we are. If you're in a state that's red colored or orange or yellow, you have a decline that's coming in terms of 18 to 22-year-olds, like forecasted future students. Blue states are the only ones that have a possible uptick in those numbers. So I'm just saying, in general, again, this is focusing on 18 to 22-year-olds. If we could freak ourselves out and drive into a wall if we only think about 18 to 22-year-olds. We have to actually open our eyes and consider all the possible people. Lots of people needed to reimagine their future because of COVID, and they were looking for opportunities to upskill. Those are your potential future students. And this is not short-term, this is long-term, because we are not producing enough humans. The population rate, in terms of we're not even replacing ourselves. So if you focus on this now, if you think about changing who your students are and being open to making sure your process actually works for all types of students, you're gonna be hooked up in the future. It's the people who think that this is just like a temporary dip that are gonna be in trouble. And so I wanna encourage us to actually be open to those things. So I will pause for 1 second though. We've been sitting for about 20 minutes. I don't have a watch, I don't know why I looked at one. If you're physically able, could you stand for a second? I mean, it's like 4 p.m., a hot Phoenix sun. Maybe some of you snuck out for happy hour early, which bless you, right? Okay, so move around a little bit. Lift your left leg, lift your right leg, switch your hips. Okay. So you've been sitting for 20 minutes. There's this protein that your brain produces called brain-derived neurotropic factor, BDNF. BDNF is basically what helps you retain new ideas. After you've been sitting for 20 minutes, you produce less of it. So the next time you get invited to a really terrible meeting that's like 45 minutes, BDNF break, just stand up, move around. If folks want to, you can stay standing as long as you want, but also you can walk along the walls, because I know it's like 4 p.m. almost, right? So anyway, you can sit. I just want to give you a little break. So this is not a short-term trend, it's long-term. I also want to just give you a picture of the future. So right now, we've built all of our systems in America around this idea that you go to high school and then you graduate and then you work the rest of your life. Or you go to community college or technical school and you work for the rest of your life. Or college and you work for the rest of your life. That is not the reality anymore. People are going to need to come to and from and get education throughout their life. The other thing I would say that we have to ban is the question, is college for everyone? Because it's asking a question that assumes that you can answer it at one point in your life. That at 18, you make a decision that you are this kind of person, so you get on that track, or you're not. It's super messed up, because I actually think, well, I've personally seen that it's problematic, but this is how you end up missing out on massive numbers of students. I experienced this in my life in that my father was one of those people who at 18 thought he was not someone who college was for him. And so he joins the Marine Corps, goes to Vietnam, comes back. Now he's like, okay, well, how am I gonna make money? So he goes to farrier school and becomes a horseshoer. I told you my family was weird. This is not surprising to any of you, right? And so he's a horseshoer. And then my brother and I come along, and one day he goes to work, and a horse flips over on him and paralyzes him from the waist down. In an instant. Just like millions of Americans, he couldn't use his body to earn an income. He had to transition into the knowledge economy. But he thought he was someone who college wasn't for him. So thankfully, he cashes in his GI Bill, and he goes to Montana State University and gets a bachelor's degree in computer science. Now, things are a little more complicated when you're in a wheelchair in terms of working, so the income turnaround wasn't huge for our family, but there's more to it than that. Like, when my dad went to Montana State, and he's just been paralyzed for like 2 years now at this point, he starts to experience things outside the classroom too. And that reminds him that he can still be an athlete, right? So he starts playing wheelchair basketball and doing races and stuff. And he ends up winning the world championships in wheelchair racing, because that's what higher ed can do. It can reintroduce you to who you are when you've gone through anything like that, right? And I'm telling you that story because I want us to not limit our design innovation work to the classroom. Because there is transformative power to the work that happens on our campuses that is not just about the classes you took or the degree you got. So when I say empathy first, design things around the needs of our students, I mean all things. And that means that reimagining most of our stuff for people who are adults, who are parents, who are working, who America is now. So the exciting thing is, this is what the future can look like. This is what's going to happen. And the faster we move here, the better we're going to be, which is people are going to come to and from education when they want to learn and grow and evolve. We don't want to have a society that is stagnating. I mean, we've all seen what's going on. We actually want people to become more educated. We want them to come back and experience higher education when they're ready to reskill, to reimagine their career, to reposition. And so we have to actually think of our design much more like this. Does that make sense? So I'm not just hopeful and like trying to be like, hey, hopey changey, you guys can do this. I actually know that this change is possible. I know that innovation is possible because I've worked with institutions around the country who have no reason to be successful together who have. These are my campuses. They didn't know each other when they first met. They just showed up in a room and started talking about a shared problem they wanted to work on, which was they wanted to graduate more students. They wanted to specifically graduate more low-income students. They wanted to figure out how to innovate together, hold each other accountable with their data, and hold down their costs. And so they formed the University Innovation Alliance in 2014. And again, they didn't know or trust each other. We had to figure this out. I mean, we built the plane while we were flying it. And so, but the lessons that I have to share with you about innovation come from their work. And it has worked because already in only, from 2014 to now, we've now graduated 97,000 additional graduates that we were expected to or on track, even our stretch goals at the time. We've increased our graduates of color by 85%. We have 500,000 students. And we've increased our low-income graduates by 45% annually. So this is just evidence that change is possible, even when it's in a topic that feels a little bit unfamiliar. The solution I would suggest is focusing on design, trying to re-engineer and redesign our institutions around the needs of students, specifically low-income, first-gen, and students of color, because we find that the things that you will do to support those students help everybody. Nobody wants to get 700 emails. Nobody wants to have terrible, bad process. Nobody wants to have, I mean, there's just financial aid holds, like you name it. All of our stuff that doesn't make sense for students, that's the stuff I'm talking about. So when people ask me like how to explain what it is that I do, and most of you, when you talk to your parents, they're like, do they also think you're still in college? Yeah, my parents do too. I tell people that I basically run like a Weight Watchers meeting for universities to be good at something they've never been good at before. It's the closest I've gotten to people actually getting it. And it's because I want you to start looking for ideas around innovation in other places. Higher education is great, but there are innovative spaces and inspirational like ideas and examples that are outside of our sector. One example for me was Weight Watchers. I was trying to figure out how to run an improvement network that would actually work. And that's actually what Weight Watchers is, right? Like, innovation's hard. Losing weight is super hard, right? And so I tried to follow, like, what are the basic principles of Weight Watchers? And like, join or don't. I'm not here paid by Weight Watchers, right? I'm just saying, like, there are examples of improvement networks, like healthcare improvement communities as well. Like, but with Weight Watchers, it was just very simple for me to borrow some of the ideas, which is no one else can sign you up for it. You have to actually make the decision that you want to be better. When you do, you weigh in on the same scale every week. And there's usually a cute little old lady who like tells you good job if you lose weight, and if you don't lose weight, she's still like, good job for coming in, right? Because we've learned that shame is not an effective vehicle to change behavior. So we don't. And all of our campuses, they have a data sharing agreement where they're sharing their data and weighing in on the same scale, right? But the real value of Weight Watchers is that like you go into a back room and people will talk about the things they're struggling with because we're all in the same boat, right? Like, I am haunted by cookies at night, okay? Whatever it is that you're struggling with, you'll give me your tips and tricks. I will share with you. This is a really simple formula, and there are other places you could get good ideas when you're trying to do innovation work. I'm just suggesting this base model for us worked as an example for you of getting ideas from other places, but also because I think that you should work together. I think that you have potential allies in this audience who have the same problems, who are struggling with the same bureaucracy, can't hire people right now, can't figure out what's going on with underemployment or with the employment, but we can't find student success professionals. They're all dealing with the same stuff, right? So this is a way that you build a peer network. I also want to share with you the other stuff that I've learned about what matters for change and innovation. But first I have to prepare you. Elegant pause. For what you look like. This is COVID, right? Exhaustion and burnout. I'm going to pause that slide because he'll keep doing it. So people are exhausted, and we are misinterpreting the Great Resignation for what really needs to be addressed. Yes, people can resign, but a lot of what we're seeing, we're struggling to hire frontline staff. The things that are missing are purpose, inspiration, and community. Being stuck in our homes, we didn't have any of those. And we lived at our work. So we weren't willing to put up with all the terrible stuff all the time anymore. Like, you're welcome and you're lucky to work here. That vibe, well, first off, it's not a good look for any sector, but that vibe doesn't work here anymore. So we actually need to make sure that the student success improvement work we do is embedded with purpose, with inspiration, and community. And I would argue that's actually the path forward. All of our work has been embedded with those. So burnout, it's hard. A vacation's not going to solve it. You'll come back to a terrible job that you hate and have that pit in your stomach on Mondays, right? So we have to actually work on the design of work. And right now it's being left to HR. HR does not have the innovation expertise, support, or capacity to take care of this. So what they're going to do is say, you need to pay more. It's fine, yes. I mean, with inflation going to be in the 1970s inflation, yeah, we're going to have to. But we actually have to reimagine our positions. Some of them can be remote. Oh my goodness. Where are my pearls to clutch, right? A lot of them could be reimagined based on what students actually value. There are things that we can do, right? But we need to literally get down to the level of, here's what a academic advisor's position description was pre-COVID. Here is what it is now. And let's actually talk to the folks and listen to them about what is most valuable. What experiences have they, tell me the stories of the times where you feel like you really made a difference in a student's life. Talk to students, right? Again, we can't just leave this to HR. Second, also, trigger warning, this is what you look like. This is before COVID, right? Because we actually have this really dangerous belief that if we just give you more work, that your plate will expand. I like magical thinking too. So fun. The problem here is we actually need to create space for people to have time to ideate, to brainstorm, to actually problem solve. The impediment, does anyone have their phone, hold up your phone? That is actually the impediment to innovation and change. It's your calendar, it's your inbox. Do you need me to say that in front of your boss? Yes. Right? It's the terrible meetings you go to. I mean, who's been to a good meeting lately? I mean, other than this one, oh good, oh see? Right, this one. But I mean at work, on Zoom. Right? Agendaless meetings. Well, those are like that's our resource. That's our naturally occurring resource in higher ed. So we actually have to be intentional about how we design our experience, and people need time to work on that. Like, what was the meeting that, one of the things I recommend is you go on a meeting diet for 2 weeks. You just cancel all I know, it's crazy. But at the end of that, with a team, with your division, you talk about this, that now we're going to revisit what things were missing, what things were essential, what did we really need. We need this because we're operating in a COVID playbook right now. We need a next 6 months playbook, and right now. How are we going to get together? What kinds of meetings and conversations do we need to have? How are we going to structure our time? We need to talk about that and do a reset for right now because we only probably have a sense of the next 6 months, and we're operating from like 2021 playbook, right? So this is stuff that you can address with time. There's this other thing about exhaustion and burnout. We give people who are really good more work. That's the reward. Like, not a raise, not a title adjustment, just more work. And lastly, when we do have a new idea, We have this problematic history in higher ed. A new thing that comes in, we don't have a process to support it, but we do usually hire a retired person to come back at 0.49. That is a dangerous, I have nothing against retirees, but if you think for decades of us doing that, what's happened is our org chart has not evolved. We're dealing with like a 1970s org chart. We don't actually staff and support new initiatives because, Doug will come back and staff it, right? We actually have to be a bit more innovative. I can see some looks around the room. Oh, pearl clutching, love it. So I spend a lot of my time pre-COVID, going from campus to campus, and I try and, I'm there to try and learn what they're doing that's different and neat. And unfortunately, most times when I walk onto a college campus, it feels like, have you ever been to the gym and there's like this guy? It's like, he's gonna do something. Like, I'm pumped for him. I just don't know what's gonna happen. This is what happens. This is what it looks like when you go to a campus that's trying to innovate. Often there's no plan. There's no way that we're going to measure if we're successful. He'll keep doing that. That we don't give ourselves time and energy to be successful. I often am asking, like, why that? What's the next thing you're going to do? Well, the boss said we're going to do predictive analytics, so we're doing predictive analytics. And how do you know that that's the right thing for you? What problem were you trying to solve? How are we going to know we're there? So that is a problem for innovation, is that we lack intentionality and strategy. The other thing is, if you want to actually raise your hand and ask for help around strategy and intentionality, this is what it's like to talk to higher education. I mean, we are obsessed with talking about ourselves and how special and different and unique we are. We don't talk about things that are actually relatable. We are preen and posture for headlines because we've been taught that. Hyper-competitive culture, it's like Hunger Games. My institution is the boopity-boop of boopity-boop, right? What that doesn't do is build relationships and community. It doesn't help you find allies, and it doesn't help you solve problems. We have a broader higher ed culture issue. But the good news is, there are solutions to all of these things. And the thing I want to make sure you understand is, I'm not going to suggest anything that costs a bunch of money. Because, it's 2022. And also, I think that actually it's, again, about time and space. So the first thing that I've learned that really helps is structuring and supporting innovation. So we have this weird thing where we create all these like vice presidents of innovation or a center for innovation. And it's like, if you have a center, it's like, we're gonna have innovation's gonna be over there. It's gonna shove it into the institution. That's where you go to get the good ideas. Or you have a vice president who's going to push it down into the institute. There's a lot of voice work happening here. What we've actually found is that everyone who works in higher ed is capable of innovation, but they're currently overwhelmed and exhausted by their calendars and their inbox and the terrible meetings. They're on a bunch of terrible committees. We believe in teams, not committees. Committees are about communication. Teams are about action. A team has a goal. A team has a way that you know that you're going to get there. A team will go away. A team will evolve over time. A team has co-captains. Committees don't even have an agenda, at best, right? So this is your permission to abolish the terrible committee that you're on. So number one, you actually need to support things with a team every time you have a new initiative. Co-captains, because turnover and transition is a real threat, you can't have any one person in charge of something. There have to be co-captains. But the other is that we found that for me, it's like the vice president for undergrad, but in general, the place where all the work is coming, you find those people who are really effective at change, and you look at their overwhelmed plates, and what you do is you actually, boop, you put a new, like a project manager or what feels like a chief of staff underneath them. We actually have a UIA fellow here in the room. Amanda, raise your hand. What? So look, she's a human being, right? They're basically like a Swiss Army knife that you put into the institution. They're trained as facilitators. They can do all kinds of work. They work cross-functional in various lanes. People don't actually know what they do. And that's beautiful because that means they don't have a plate that is already full. Their job is to offload the overburdened plate of the people who they work for. That is actually a strategic hire, not more vice presidents of innovation. If there are vice presidents of innovation in the room, I am very sorry. I will not be available for talking afterward. I'm just kidding. Actually, I have lots of friends who are them. So be strategic about how we give people capacity. It's actually like, we have a lot of committees. Guess what? They don't have staff. They borrow someone's executive assistant's like 15 seconds. So no wonder things don't happen in between meetings, right? Like, we have to actually create structure for how we're going to support ideas. The most innovative thing that will transform the future of higher ed is a Post-it note, right? So here, I promise you this is true. What we've found is if you want to redesign your work to serve the needs of students, you actually need to see what's going on as it currently is. So we do this thing called process mapping. It's not unique to us. You could get trained by Orion. We have free online training. You can learn how to do this. There are people at your institution who know how to do this. Our fellows are trained in facilitation for this. What you do is you identify a booby trap, a landmine, a process that's a problem. So we've done this with, you start by just engaging in empathy interviews with students. Everyone has to go out and talk to 5 students. What's something that was difficult for you that you, if you had a magic wand, you would fix at the university? Talk to me about your experience. What has been the most challenging? Have those conversations. Very quickly, you will pick a process that needs help. Then you invite everyone who works on that process. So we've done this with major change. Financial aid holds. Financial aid holds are a hot topic because they're like a Wild West in terms of who gets to set them. Like anyone who just feels like at any point in time setting a financial aid hold, boom, right? And the students are the ones who have to pay the price for that. There's no regulation in terms of these things. Emails. We're terrible at emails, and we send 1 million of them, right? Why is there no communications cop? Like, how do we not know, like, why is there not a protocol for when we do message students or there's duplicated messages? So you pick any of these things. Major change, transfer, whatever, admissions, graduation. You get people who all work on that thing in a room. You play some sweet jams, which is, we have public playlists we put out there. Just set the vibe, right? People like want to, this is where community and purpose and inspiration connect. Like, I don't want to have like a terrible meeting. I will stand around and awkwardly shuffle to Mariah Carey's greatest hits or something, you know? So you get everyone in a room for like an afternoon or 2 hours, and we're going to just map this one process. What are we currently doing step by step? Because we're all in the same room together, we're all going to see it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because every one of our processes was not designed around students. We have these fantasy thinking. We think that the process is this way, but we actually are only owning our part of the lane, so we don't actually know what students are experiencing. So how many times are we emailing them? Let's walk this through. So you step back over the course of 2 hours, and everyone in the room just saw, wow, we need to fix this. I can't get access to that data. I do have that data. What's your email, right? This is what happens in the room. It's magic. You figure out some low-hanging fruit, just some easy, quick wins you could get today. There's stuff you could change today. And because everyone's in the same room, you don't have to go out and try and like schedule a bunch of meetings to get buy-in. Everyone saw it, right? We need to fix this. And then at the end, you have the president, provost, chancellor come in, and their prompt is, what did we learn? Not what did we screw up, what did we learn? That is profound. It's invigorating because people are actually excited. They're talking about their design. They feel like there's stuff they can do. I'm not in the same meeting I'm always in. I'm working cross-functionally. So that's process mapping. Super easy, $0 other than Post-it notes. But here's a real example of it. Michigan State, process map, they decided to get everyone in the room who works on student success for the first time in the history of the institution. Red flag number 1. Most of you have never done that. Just for an afternoon, all right? We're going to map out just the first 3 months from when the student gets admitted to the day they show up on campus. Everyone putting up Post-it notes, all these different things. These are different process. At the end of the day, they looked and they saw that they had put 450 Post-it notes up in the email line, which means that in 3 months, every Michigan State student was receiving 450 emails as they came in, which says to first-generation students, good luck. We're not going to help you. Also, sign up for Quidditch, right? There was also 50 financial aid holds the institution did not know about that students experienced. 50. That is happening at your institution. And so by the end of that day, they're like, oh my gosh, we have stuff to work on right now. There were people who were sharing their data that they didn't have access to prior. And all of a sudden, you start feeling that energy. That is how you drive change. It is you do this every few months. I would recommend 3 times a year. And what you do is you teach yourself a new kind of cellular structure, which is we are a learning organization. We actually do innovation, and we do it together. And we find a process that is problematic for students. We actually get to have a fun afternoon process mapping, which we make sure it's a fun and energizing experience. And then slowly over time, we are re-engineering our institution around our students. And guess what? I'm not a consultant trying to sell you something. You all did this yourself. You have Post-it notes. We're spending millions on thousands of hours of time that's already being spent. Why not actually use it for our students? So this is just a very simple way that you can actually re-engineer things for your students. I also want to arm you with a few things that I think will help you as you go back to your team, and you will be able to ask these questions, which I think are profound and helpful for you to get things generative. The first question innovative institutions ask themselves, that you need to ask yourself, is how do we treat new ideas? When was the last time a good new idea came in? You have them. You've been doing new stuff all the time. Where'd it come from? When so-and-so had an offsite? When that person went away to a conference? When somebody took a vacation and came back with a good idea? If you don't talk about where ideas come from on your campus, you will not get more of them. And when you get new ideas, how do you treat them? Do people have to debate new ideas? Because new ideas are baby ideas. They are fresh and new, and you want to cultivate more of them. You want people to offer new ideas and solutions. But if they have to defend them, they'll never be generative. You'll never get to pitch and catch ideas. You won't be able to brainstorm, come up with solutions. So how are we going to treat a new idea or an idea when we're talking? I would recommend using yes and in your meetings. Instead of just no but, it's thank you, yes, that's a good idea, and here's how I'd improve upon your idea, right? You get into that generative space. So you need to figure out how you want to treat new ideas. You need a process. This is a good prompt to get the juices flowing. Second, you need a strategy for failure. The most innovative places have an autopsy process. Every one of you has $1 million failure on your campus that we just don't talk about. And we don't talk about it. We can't stop it from happening again. And we're also sentencing other people to repeat those mistakes, and students write those checks. So we have to talk about failure. The most innovative spaces are not afraid of failure. They understand it is the path to innovation, creativity, and change. So what I would suggest is, how are we going to handle it when we have something, let's think about something that didn't go well recently. I know that you have like 5 things. Why'd that happen? Oh, we never talked to a student, but we created a student-facing process. Or this division, they just went through a leadership transition. Oh, so we had one captain? So maybe we do co-captains? Okay, innovation, right? We have to actually have a process for how you're gonna handle failure and talk about it, and we have to make it so that there's social safety around it. It's not, hey, what'd you screw up? It's, hey, what'd you learn? Cool, thank you for contributing that. It takes vulnerability to do this, so you wanna create the safety around it. The last thing is that you need to have a conversation about the kinds of habits your institution would have if they actually achieved their goals. We have all kinds of habits. We have graduation, we have start of the school year, we have like little things that we do, we have ceremonies, right? And so they always happen. But have you given yourself the chance to say, okay, if we were gonna try and eliminate our equity gaps, what kind of habits would an institution who did that, what would they have? Those are the kinds of prompts you wanna have. I recently became a meditator for the first time. I tried for years. I couldn't figure out how. I was like, I don't know, transcendental? Do I need to be on a yoga mat? Do I need to light some incense? Like, this is hard and boring, right? And once I stopped thinking about being a meditator, and I actually focused on being the kind of person who had the habit of meditation, it changed everything. So I meditate every morning, sometimes for 5 breaths, sometimes for 10 minutes. It's not pretty, I'm not winning any awards, but I do it. Focus on the habits that your institution should have if they were going to achieve certain things. If your division was going to actually accomplish your goals, what kinds of habits would they have? The last thing, I know that all of you are at different places, different institutions. Not Harvard, obviously. I'm just kidding, that's good news, and I have something in common with you. We're in a sector where we're encouraged to talk about how different and special we are. How tall and different, I think of it like a mountain range, universities. They're all different. They're serving different spaces, different students. And I actually think if you want to have the kind of generative conversation, to find allies, to do this innovation work and make change for the future, don't talk about your peaks. Instead, focus on your shared valleys. You all have the same problems. I swear. I go to universities all the time. You all have the same problems. And it's much more helpful if you can actually talk to each other and engage in pitching and catching ideas and teaming up together, because ideas are portable. And again, isomorphism, I know that you actually have a lot more in common, and this will build the community that you're looking for. So that's my advice for you when it comes to innovation, creativity, and change. The only other thing I would tell you is that you heard my story. You heard that my academic experience wasn't awesome. It was pretty awesome, actually. It's pretty fun. But the truth is, despite everything going wrong, I wouldn't change any of it, because it totally changed my life. It changed my family's life. And at the end of the day, my favorite day of the month is the day I pay my student loans, because it's a reminder to keep betting on myself, because I remember how terrified I was that this might not work out, and maybe these people who aren't calling me and letting me know to come into the office hours, maybe I actually don't know what I'm doing, right? But higher education profoundly changes the lives of the people that you serve. What you do really matters. What you've gone through in the last 2 years, you deserve the courage and the confidence that you've earned from that. And I'm really optimistic that I think you can actually transform your institutions to meet the needs of the new normal. So thank you so much for the chance to talk with you today.